he wasn't always there. Like, he wasn't always living with me. Like, he never really lived with me, but it was more of just, I would tell him that my dad would put forth an effort to talk to me and, like, communicate, but it wouldn't be a constant, like, there wouldn't be any constant visits.
How did you feel about that?
It really didn't affect me because I was always, like, dependent on my mom. I always knew she was there for me, so it really didn't hit me that he wasn't actually there.
Most of us have heard the statistics. In 2013, 55% of black children lived with only one parent. Only 34% of black children lived with both of their parents. 72% of black children are born to unmarried parents. Perhaps most importantly, only 33% of African American fathers live with one or more of their children, which means a whopping 67% of them don't. These trending statistics over the years have resulted in a generation of black children that have grown up mostly without their fathers. But before we dive into an analysis of how this has impacted our community, we started by asking people one simple question.
What is a father?
Wow. The first word that comes to my mind is a protector. A provider, a promise keeper, an encourager, a teacher.
A father is, I guess, a male figure that provides for the well-being of someone he's raising.
A father, in my opinion, is somebody who you get influenced off, like when you start getting into boys and stuff like that.
A father is someone that provides for the family, someone that acts as the backbone, someone that is the leader, that is the head of the household, and that does all the dirty work.
To me, there's two different things. You have a father and you have a daddy. A father, in my opinion, is someone who knows how to make the baby. A daddy, in my opinion, is someone who takes care of the kid.
The father is the first man that a little girl really loves. So I think just showing a non-sexual or non-intimate connection with a girl is the first. It should be the first person with her father.
Where does your understanding of a male's role come from? Like the answer that you just gave me.
It would be my mom and television.
And I did a lot of manipulating, trying to convince his dad to be a part of his life, and like, this is what you need to do, step up to the role, this is your son, a whole lot of, trying to work with him. Where do you want me to meet you? So I can meet you someplace so you can see him, and I did all of that.
His priorities were that maybe he was playing basketball, or maybe he was hanging with friends and he needed to be home, or he needed to be focusing on the job. I had certain expectations of what I needed him to do, and what he was able to do didn't work.
But I think it's commonplace because unfortunately they've gotten used to the fact that either a lot of men just don't know how to handle being a man or being a father, or they're not interested in being a real man or a father. I honestly don't know.
If he initiated it and he wanted to, have a relationship where we would just hang out, talk, bond, commune, that would be cool. And I think I'd be open to it, but I just don't know if it would be worth it.
Strained relationships between fathers and their children has become a national concern. In 2010, President Obama launched the President's Fatherhood and Mentoring Initiative, which aimed to partner with community groups around the country to promote fatherhood and support families that lack fathers. In addition, a number of local community organizations have been founded nationwide to respond to the lack of men in the lives of America's children. Considering the focus that fatherhood has received on both a national and local level, it's important to remember why the presence of fathers is so crucial.
Honestly, I think there are things that men are naturally supposed to teach their sons. I think when it comes to having daughters, that the men are there to to show the daughters how a man is supposed to treat you. And so, the role of a dad, plays its part in terms of what to expect, what you need to do. It teaches a boy how to be a father. It teaches a woman how to look for in a father.
And there are lots of different, you want a two-parent household that is also emotionally stable, right? If it's abusive, then that's not going to be helpful to the child. The value, though, of having a father around, or someone who's a father figure who is consistently around, is that you bring the perspective of what it means to be a man in society, and for Black families, what it means to be a Black man in society, and to show both women and men what the role is in relationship to each other.
For me, my relationship with my father is, this is my father, this is the person that I measure any man up to. So how the things that he taught me, this is what I look for in a partner. So that's where, like, my brother's trying to emulate my father himself, and I'm trying to find somebody that has the same characteristics as my father. I have the example of, in my eyes, what a man should be, how a man should treat a woman, how a man should treat people in general, and not necessarily just with my dad and my mom's relationship with each other, but like my dad's relationship with me and my brother, my dad's relationship with his family. It's like how a man should treat other people and how he should react in certain situations. As opposed to, if I didn't have that, then the little things like walking on the outside of the curb, like those are big in a smaller sense to me, because it's like those are important, but what's more important is how does this man treat me? How is he going to take care of me? And not in a financial way, but more so in like a supportive way.
There's some things that a man has to do for another man. And, bless him in his manhood.
Despite the understanding that fathers hold an important role in the family dynamic, many fathers just don't stick around long enough to fulfill that role for their children.
I actually did have a conversation with him about that not long ago, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, 2 years maybe. Just saying that, he needs to understand that what the choices that he's made as a man and the choices that have resulted from that affect not just him, it affects everybody else around him. So that kind of longing to have my dad as part of my life and longing him to be different than what he turned out to be, I had to get to a point where I was able to, I don't want to say necessarily let go, but I needed to understand that my dad is who he is, and this is who he's going to be until he decides to change.
I knew I wanted his father in the picture, but I knew that I couldn't. It took me a while to realize that I couldn't force his hand. He had to want to be there. He had to be able to see exactly what a blessing Kenny was. And if he couldn't see it, it was nothing I can do that, People do things for their own selfish reasons, whether it's fear or just flat out, I just don't want to be bothered. I think a lot of times it's more so fear than anything.
But this is a national problem, right? So why does it seem to be affecting Black families so heavily? Is this really a Black issue after all?
If we would put it on a scale, I think the rate of it is high in the Black communities.
Why do you think that happens?
It's systemic. It's been since way back that club goers meet at school, different things. Or it could be just how that parent has that child, and the same thing happens over and over again,
So the lack of exposure, just for a few of my friends growing up, them not even going to Manhattan to just even witness a different lifestyle, how, there's life outside of, these projects, or there's life outside of, this building that you live in. And I think the lack of exposure is really what drives most people to, you know, follow in footsteps that, you know, may not be deemed correct or can lead them to losing their life or becoming a part of the prison industrial complex.
I know that we lack identity, we lack self-esteem, and we don't really know who we are. You know, we're still searching, you know, who are we? I mean, a lot of women, they get mad at the fathers and push them away, and then the fathers, they don't take heed and say, well, I'm gonna still be in my child's life. They just say, okay, well, you don't want me in his life, I'm not gonna be in it. Okay, and then I think it's because a lot of the men, they didn't have no fathers, so they don't know how to say, okay, well, I'm gonna still be in the life regardless of what me and the woman is going through.
So how did we get to this point? In order to understand the current state of African American fatherhood, perhaps it would be best to start by exploring the history of the black family in America. We sat down with Dr. Richard Smith, a sociology professor at McDaniel College.
But there's a number of factors that contribute to that. I mean, one, we look at our history, coming from slavery. If you look at the institution of slavery, you look at how the family was totally destroyed. But what amazes me about slavery is that during that institution, there was a resiliency of the black family. In other words, even though mothers and children and fathers and wives were being separated, fathers and the children were being separated, you will find that the fathers, and the mothers too, but the fathers oftentimes tried to maintain that relationship. In other words, if they got sent to a nearby plantation, they would come back when they could to visit their children. They would come back when they could to visit their wives. At the end of slavery, you will hear stories of men that would go looking for their children and looking for their family that they were separated from. So even though children were taken away from fathers, even though fathers could not be a father, there was a differential in power. What I mean by that is father really did not have the rights over their own children. The master did. The master had the right to discipline their children when they felt it was time to, when they saw it was fit. So the father, in essence, had to step back and watch someone else father their children, take that role from them, not willingly, of course, but take the role from them. And as a result, what it means to be a father, what it meant to be a father at that time changed.
Sociologist Daniel Patrick Moynihan produced a groundbreaking report that brought light to this issue back in 1965. The Negro Family, The Case for National Action, outlined how the effects of slavery led to a lack of jobs that was systematically making black men unfit to fulfill their roles as husbands and fathers.
What Daniel Patrick Moynihan found was that there was a pathology within the African American family due to slavery, that from slavery we have female-dominated households that continued, and as a result the family was already destroyed. In essence, what he was arguing was that there was some problem with the black family, and that there was issues with the black family. And if anything's going to change with the African American population, it has to change with the individuals within the family themselves. So now what you find is that you see social programs lessen for black families. You have less opportunities for black families as a result. Instead of focusing on building the black family, the blame got put on the black family. Instead of looking at the historic racism, injustices, racism that continued through that day, they looked at there must be something wrong with the black family. So with that happening, sadly, one report, it seemed like, influenced politicians, influenced government response, and led to a lot of the gains during the civil rights movement to be lessened, because the focus was now on the problem of the family and not necessarily the problem with America as a society. What I would say to them is that we can't disconnect history from today. We can't disconnect the lingering effects of slavery, of what did not happen during the Reconstruction that should have happened during the Reconstruction, that probably would have helped African American families to be better off today. The racism that has been and continues to be embedded in our society, the white racial frame of African Americans and how we are and who we are. You cannot disconnect all of that and say, well, you should do better because you have many choices, many more opportunities. Those opportunities are still less in comparison to white families and people of European descent.
In the years that followed slavery, a number of initiatives were put into place that not only restricted the black father, but in some instances directly pushed him out of the family. For example, the Social Security Act of 1935 included the Aid to Dependent Children program, which was originally intended to provide welfare benefits to poor single parents. However, the King versus Smith case of 1968 determined that cohabitation of any kind would make the single parent, which was in most cases the mother, ineligible for financial aid. The precedent that was set by this case taught many poor mothers who had babies out of wedlock that it was financially advantageous for them to keep the father out of the home. Although that program was eventually repealed in 1996, many existing welfare programs provide benefits for households with a total income near the poverty line. Couple this with the fact that unemployment has plagued many African American men, and keeping the father around may seem to some like more of a liability than an asset.
Again, men have grown up with the message that they are supposed to be the providers. And so black men who are stripped of everything that they associate with manhood, my ability to provide an income, my ability to be the one who's the leader of the household, then they're going to be more likely to be absent if they feel like that there's no reason to be there. And women are less likely to want them around if they're just another burden to support instead of someone who's contributing equally to the household.
You know, I think the black family never really had an opportunity to develop their own form of family. And what I mean by that is, if you look at slavery, for example, initially it wasn't allowed for blacks to have families, to marry. And when it was allowed, it was only allowed so that through procreation, the master could gain greater wealth, could have more workers, could have more people to sell. And it wasn't necessarily, so we can create this family environment. I think the problem is not necessarily that the family was destined to fail. I think we never really understood, or never really got an opportunity to develop the family that we want to develop.
When did it happen when black men began to be shut out of the key systems of success? In slavery, everybody was shut out, so you could, just being there was a contribution. So they were always fighting to be with their family, but you were all slaves. So kind of everybody was, on the same playing field. Then you had Reconstruction, where there were all these opportunities, but then after that, everything was shut down in terms of that progress.
In American society, racial imbalances exist in a number of different sectors: in education, in housing, in employment, in salaries. Considering these trends, some may wonder whether the absence of African American fathers is its own problem, or simply another effect of societal discrimination.
So poverty is a huge deal, and race affects poverty, or race, I should say, is correlated with poverty. So you have a higher percentage of the black population and a Latino population in poverty compared to their white peers.
Dr. Roxana Harlow is a former sociology professor and the founder of Higher Learning Incorporated, which was a nonprofit organization providing additional educational programming for students ages 11 through 17 in the greater Baltimore area. A high percentage of the students that the program supported were boys, and she estimates that roughly 70% of those boys were in homes without fathers. From her viewpoint, poverty and a lack of jobs have forced black men out of their families.
Why they aren't as present? Because black men are less likely to be employed. Some of that, and all of these factors intersect, right? They're less likely to be hired. And studies have shown that, taking resumes only, a resume with a black sounding name, that person is less likely to be called back than a resume with a white sounding name. But they also are more likely to be imprisoned, which makes it even that much more difficult to be hired. Maybe mid to mid 20th century, maybe mid to late 20th century, when black people began to get more opportunities, but in doing that, you had the separation, you had the concentration of poverty in black areas, and you had wealthier families moving out to different neighborhoods, and you began to have this economic separation in the black community. And then you have men who then again are facing discrimination, who are facing discrimination in the legal system, in the education system, and not really feeling and having fewer and fewer role models as to what a healthy family looks like. I would say again that the issue for black men isn't one of not wanting to be there. Because what I see, like I said, especially with the kids who are in this alternative detention, is that they want to be there for their future kids, you know, who they imagine are their kids, and they want to be there for their kids. But what happens is that kind of life happens and gets in the way.
Do you think that the American governmental system has set the black family up to fail?
It's not necessarily the government per se, but it's about all of our social systems, our legal systems, our economic systems, and meaning the way that we hire and fire, the way that we arrest or not arrest, or give a sentence or not a sentence, the way that our educational system has set black men up to fail. You know, who we educate, how it's funded, the way that we expect kids to learn, what we teach people, what we don't teach people. Those dynamics, I think, set people up to fail.
You think about it, goes all the way back to right before civil rights. Before men were given the choice to decide if they want to stay with their family, people were coming in telling them that you're not going to be with them. They were separating mothers and fathers, you know, husbands and wives. We weren't able to get married. You know what I'm saying? We were not able to get married and then be seeing a legal marriage, living on plantations. They removed fathers from the home as far back, you know, as slavery. Women raised the kids. The fathers would sit someplace else, you know, and unfortunately, it is carried over into this generation. It's carried over long, you know, from that way back, if you think about it.
Well, some of it's systemic. I mean, you know, some families are put in situations where they can get more fiscal support from the government if the man's not in the house. So it is systemically strategic to keep the man out of the house if you want some money, if you want the kind of money or support that you need. Of course, that's not the case in every scenario, but I think that is a reality.
Amazes me how, when it comes to race or African Americans, how often people say, well, you have many choices now. You're here now. There's opportunities now. Now you can do this. Now you can do that. Yes, but it takes a lot more. I think it was Du Bois who gave the example of two runners, two people on the track. And you have one that's been training all their life, and then you have another one that was in chains all their life, and then they're free from their chains, put on the track, and told to run. Obviously the one that has the training, obviously the one that has the background is the one that's going to get ahead all the time and be able to win.
While there are both historical and social factors that have contributed to the absence of fathers in Black America, many stakeholders within the Black community are quick to point out that these absent men must also be held responsible for their actions.
I don't know if it's fear in our men that keeps them from doing what they're supposed to do. I can't really answer that question. I don't know. I can't, because you can come up with several different reasons. Oh yeah, he's not there because his daddy wasn't there. Oh, he's not there, you know, because of this, and you know. Okay, well that's when do you take responsibility? When do you stop blaming what wasn't in your life and start taking responsibility for choices.
Because what we learn is that macho stuff. We learn sports. We learn competitive and clashing, and that's what strength is. We in the gym pumping iron, stuff, but it's like we're real weak. Physically we got all this, but we're weak. Because the real stuff, that's why we leave. We can't handle that stuff. We can go out and run up down the field and run into bricks and all that kind of stuff, but being in the family and dealing with that.
Maybe it's occurring more in our community, but I just think that people are giving up faster. People are giving up. They're not working through it. And that, there's a lot of responsibility involved with being a parent.
Part of it is individual choice. A part of it is destroying ourselves.
With this social and historical context, we can begin to understand some of the reasons why the widespread absence of fathers in Black communities continues to be a prevalent trend. Their absence has had a lasting effect on children, on single mothers, and on the Black community as a whole.
I didn't realize it, but today my brothers say, you were always the man I looked up to growing up. And it was just sort of crazy because I guess I was teaching them lessons I hadn't even learned for myself. But I sort of joined the frat and, my relationship with guys became, more closer and tight knit. And it forced me to face a couple things. In sophomore year, I just saw a lot of my LBs with their dads and a lot of lessons I was learning from them, I was actually learning from their fathers and they were sort of a conduit. And it just got to a point where I was sort of mad. I felt like, these aren't things I should have had to learn from anybody else.
So you said after 4 years you still kind of feel awkward around him. Is that something that you would want to change?
I mean, yes, but it'll take time.
Okay. What do you think needs to happen for you guys to become more comfortable with each other?
I mean, spend more time together, but it's either I always have a busy schedule or he has a busy schedule. When I get in trouble sometimes with my mom and my mom doesn't want to see me anymore, I call my dad and he was like, well, I'm sorry, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And I'm like, well, you never have time.
I remember one time I was leaving a church after speaking. It was in the heart of Southeast Washington, D.C., and in an area called Potomac Gardens. It was kind of a pretty notorious area at the time in the 1980s. And I was going to my car and there's a boy out there. He must have been about 12 years old, 13 years old. It was about 11 o'clock at night. I was like, what are you doing out here? And he said, what you mean? I said, what are you doing out here? How come you're in the house? And he says, don't nobody make me come in the house. And he said it like that was big. What he was really telling me is I have no supervision. There's no man in my life that's covering me.
In many occasions, children know who their father is, whether he lives with them or not. An interesting dynamic is created for these children who grow up knowing their dads, but also knowing that their dads have opted not to take active roles in their childhood.
He was introduced to me as an uncle because my grandmother always played the role of grandma in my life. She was always grandma. It didn't come, I didn't start realizing that there was something missing with this because she wasn't the grandmother. She wasn't the mother of my mother and she wasn't the mother of my daddy. So, but she was always grandma. So he's always been in my life since I was an infant, but he wasn't always introduced to me as my dad, my father, in so many words. So, but yeah, he's always been in.
A couple of times he introduced me as his son when I went to see him. Well, actually, I didn't go to see him. I went to a place where some of my friends live across from the place like everyone has what they call American Legions. And he would pull up and go in and speak to him. And he introduced his friends as, this is my son, that type of thing. But he played no role, no financial role or no discipline role or, there's no role at all.
What did you think would said that to you?
I was like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not my dad. You know, they always tease me. But, you know, my mom and the people that lived around us, their parents knew. So it trickled down to their kids. But, you know, I got the information from them and still not believing it until my mother said it. It came out of her mouth, you know, like I said, when I was 13 years old.
I mean, I don't know what will happen.
What do you think needs to happen in order for it to be better?
Well, we go out to eat and stuff like that, but we don't really talk. We eat. So it's kind of like, hey, we're gonna go out to eat today. Let's talk about stuff and stuff like that, but we don't really even talk.
My father tries now to be that person that I can talk to about these things, but he kind of, I don't know if I should get into this, but he kind of lost my trust at one point. So now I just don't use him as that person to talk to about personal things anymore. So, yeah.
So growing up, we didn't see too much of my father at all because he worked in a cruise ship and he was always away, and he actually didn't grow up with his father, so I don't think he knew a lot of the responsibilities that it entailed, nor did he give it too much thought outside of what he had known. And he was just absent for a lot, and we had to learn a lot of lessons from our mom.
The effects of these strained relationships can manifest themselves in a variety of ways for children, such as rebellious behavior. Others may respond by becoming more reclusive and hesitant to allow people into their personal lives. One trend that is currently being realized in cities across America is the impact that it's had on academics.
In terms of the students' academic level, the students' participation in higher learning, the students' sense of well-being. So kids who are coming from those two-parent families do tend to be more academically advanced, or more kind of tend to have fewer behavioral challenges, but their challenges are not the same kind of level as the challenges of the boys who do not have fathers present.
For boys specifically, there appears to be some correlation between the absence of a father figure and having academic and behavioral struggles. These boys are often faced with the internal conflict of figuring out how to behave as a man without the luxury of an actual patriarch to set the example.
So men and young men are growing up in a society that says that men are dominant. Men should be in charge. Men are strong. Men are, men should be the ones calling the shots. But in their lives, they have a bunch of women always telling them what to do. From their teachers, because especially elementary and middle school level, the majority of teachers are women. And even in high school, they're going to get a lot of women. You start seeing more male teachers there, but even in high school, they're still going to have a lot of women. Then they have their mothers, their aunts, their grandmothers, whoever has primary custody of them, taking care of them. Then they get to higher learning, and they have me telling them, and usually, and all of my assistants in the classroom have always been women. So they have women telling them what to do in the summer. They have women telling them what to do when they go home. They have women telling them what to do in school. Yet they're starting to come into their manhood. They're starting to be teenagers, and all they have are all these women telling them what to do in a society that says, I'm supposed to be the one who's dominant. I'm supposed to be the one in charge, and I don't have anyone telling me or showing me what that means, showing me what my role is.
But it was a totally different time. So like now it's a totally, these kids, I believe, they have no respect for authority now. Whereas though when I was growing up, see, because we had older people that we looked up to, so we had to respect them. But now, these kids, they have no respect for authority, for their parents, for anything.
Why do you think that is?
Because they wasn't taught.
Not only does the absence of fathers affect behavioral patterns, but it also begins to affect how those children view family dynamics. In some instances, it may even change what they envision their own households looking like as they grow older.
And because I work also with young black teens in Baltimore who are part of an alternative to detention program. And some of the things that they say are very, it's saddening, but it's insightful. They tend to want children, and they always talk about the fact that they want children, but they don't want to be married. They don't want to get married. They say that they want kids, but they don't want to get married. When I ask them why, oh, because, it's going to end up breaking up anyway. They see marriage as just something that is restrictive and not something that is a positive. Marriage is just something that holds you down until you get with the next woman anyway. So why would I bother getting married when I could just, it's just easier to go from woman to woman. So they haven't had experience with stable families and stable households. All they see are women and men fighting. They talk about, you're just going to be arguing, fighting with her anyway, and then you're stuck with her, so why would I want to do that? But I want kids.
And, she started to ask more, I guess, as she's gotten older, well, Mom, don't you want to be married, or don't you want to be with somebody, or, don't you want to be in a relationship? And I've totally, explained to her, of course I would. Anyone else would be crazy to not want that. But the difference is that I told her, until I have that, I want you to work toward, having a relationship with someone, but, make your decisions based upon what you want in life and not what you're ready to settle for.
Although the focus of absent fatherhood tends to be on the children, it's important to also take note of the effects that these absences have had on single mothers. These mothers are often given the very difficult task of raising and providing for children without the help of another adult.
We have enough of them, and do they all step up and do what they're supposed to do? No. We're out here. The men are out here. They're out here. They're just not all doing what they're supposed to do.
It wasn't tough for me to raise her because she's a good girl. She really is. I just hope that, it's like you said, I just hope that she doesn't then repeat the cycle that she's had with me. I want her to have a different life, and that's what I think every parent wants, is a different life for their kids.
My priorities at that time was making sure that the bills were paid, rent was paid, and, that they had what they needed. And that we had the same kind of goal about what was needed.
I know how to explain it. I think both parents are needed in the household, but it's important, especially in today's society, with our young men growing up and not having that positive role model. They're having to look towards coaches and pastors and teachers. It should be in the home. They should be able to have that role model in the home.
Many point to the cyclical nature of single-parent homes, which often produce children who then go on to become single parents themselves. If this is true, and we're producing generation after generation of children who were raised by only their mothers, then how are young black boys supposed to learn what it means to be a good father?
There are things I'm not going to know just because nobody did it for me, or nobody told me, son, you should definitely keep this in mind, or I'm not going to have a dad I could call to ask parental advice, and I probably wouldn't want to ask him anyway. But I honestly don't think I'll be prepared effort-wise. Like, I'll put in the effort, I'll ask questions, but I don't think you could really research being a father.
I guess from being around my uncles, because my uncle had kids, so I guess watching him. But a lot on my own, a lot just watching other fathers and see how they act, see what they do. So it came from a lot of different places. Like no one. It really came just from a lot of feedback from other fathers growing up. So I just seen a lot. So I took from that to say, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. So I just took from there.
When I was raised, or being raised, I didn't know my biological father. He left, I believe, around the age of 2. And then I had a stepfather that came in, he married my mother. He adopted me. My name was changed to the name I have today. But about 5 years later, he left. It was gone. I didn't see him anymore until about recently, within the last 3 or 4 years. And that impacted me greatly. But one thing that stayed with me as a young child was that I won't do that to my children. I will never leave my children.
Keith Battle is the lead pastor of Zion Church in Landover, Maryland. As a leader and as a parent of 3, Battle believes that all fathers should have mentors that help them figure out how to parent effectively.
If I was to place it on a scale of, is it something that's critical versus something that's optional, I would call it hypercritical. Hypercritical. And not just having mentors for fathering, but having the right ones. I think being challenged by people who fathered me, mentors, being loved. I have a mentor, a number of mentors, but one of them is a guy that challenged me to start kissing my kids every day, kissing and hugging them. And he says, "Do you do that?" I said, no. When they were little. Most sons have hair on their face now, man. Grown men, 18, 21, daughter's 23. I don't do that. He says, you need to do that every day. Look them in the face, tell them you love them, and kiss them, and hold them. Like, get out of here, man. He says, yes. You need to be connected to the loving, to use a loving father.
With the divorce rates amongst African Americans hovering close to 70%, the probability of an African American child growing up with 2 married parents is fairly slim. What's more, 50% of Black Americans have never been married at all. Based on these statistics, it appears that the lack of married couples has played some part in the absence of Black fathers.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Not just the space, the physical space, but the mental, spiritual space. You and the mother, who are supposed to be one, are not on the same page. That's a huge challenge.
I actually did have a conversation with him about that not long ago, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, 2 years maybe. Just saying that, you know, he needs to understand that what the choices that he's made as a man and the choices that have resulted from that affect not just him, it affects everyone else around him. So that kind of longing to have my dad as part of my life, and longing him to be different than what he turned out to be, I had to get to a point where I was able to, I don't want to say necessarily let go, but I needed to understand that my dad is who he is, and this is who he's going to be until he decides to change.
It's like hurt people. So it's like hurt, it's just a hurtful thing. And unless you're really coached, that's what we do. We defend and we fight and we take revenge and we try to get people back for hurting us. She hurt her. And so, and then the child who is innocent of that doesn't even know of it, just becomes a part of it. They say when elephants fight, the grass gets trampled, that's what happens.
For single parents who themselves were raised by single mothers, the reflection of their own childhood experiences can be critical in determining the steps that they must take in raising their own children.
So when I married my wife and we started to have children, my first child was named after me. And the reason why he's named after me is not some masculinity type thing, I want my seed and my name to go on and on and on. Nothing like that. It was more so to let him know that you're my son, you have my name, I have a responsibility to you.
You parent how you've been parented in so many words. I'm parented. I do a lot of things that my mother has once done, not realizing I'm doing it until after I've done it. Like, oh, my mother did that. I hated when she did that. But you are a parent based off of how you've been parented. You do things but based off of what you know, what you saw in your own household. You know, as early as a baby, when you see little girls walking around with carriers and strollers and baby dolls and stuff, well, that's because that's what they see mommy do.
So I think I have an important role as a father to make sure that my children know that they can achieve in a society that is damaged, that is broken, that they can achieve what they desire to achieve. Other males, they may not have any of those examples. And what they see more than often is a man that pops in and pops out. A man that plants seeds and then run. And they grow up maybe having a warped sense of what it means to be a black man, that this is what you should do.
As your son gets older, do you have any concerns about him becoming a man?
Yes, absolutely. I do.
Why do you think you have those concerns?
Because one, he's a male. He's a male of color. He is so many distractions out here, so many things out here that can keep him from his goals. He needs to understand about life, what kind of things to try to avoid, to stay safe so that he can have, he can work towards the life that he wants to have.
I feel like anything that a child should have to talk to their father about, anything personal, that person, the father, should be there, like, for that. Because it's very hard as a male growing up to talk to your mom about personal things, like anything like hygiene. It's even hard to talk about that. It's just hard to talk about anything that you feel comfortable with to your mom.
For every man that grew up without a father and used that as an excuse to why they can't make it, why they don't have a job, why they decided to participate in some criminal activity. You have another man that said, this is the reason why I'm not going to do this. This is why I'm going to educate myself. This is why I'm going to do better, because I don't want to be like what I saw. So I do believe that we have a great part in deciding whether or not we want to be the type of men we want to be, the type of fathers we want to be, and develop the type of families that we want to have.
In many cases, it seems that the cycle of absent fatherhood is perpetuated by low expectations across the board. Perhaps a big step in avoiding the cycle might come from teaching boys how to better treat women, and by teaching girls what they should expect from men.
Fathers are important for teaching young ladies self-respect for themselves in relation to men, what your relationship, how men should be treating you, but also how you should be treating men.
I honestly don't know. I can't necessarily say that I've had the best of luck with relationships with men, but I'm not sure if that's just because of the men I was choosing at the time, or if that just had a lot to do with the fact that I just didn't have that male role model. I had enough role models in my life that were men that I think gave me a good example of what men were. But again, I don't know, if it was a chicken or the egg kind of thing.
For young girls especially, their father is the first relationship that they have with a man. I take that very big for myself, because now I want to make sure that they understand how a man is supposed to treat them. So I deal with them firmly, because it's important. I make sure that I expect certain things from them. I don't ask them to do, I expect certain things from them. I say, anytime I speak to them, you're young ladies, I want you to conduct yourself like this so you get the respect that you're supposed to get.
If I'm on a date and I'm walking down, like we're walking down the sidewalk, and the guy moves to the outside of the sidewalk, I say, oh, my daddy does that. And I just think about it. It's not necessary. And sometimes I'll say, like, my dad does that. My daddy told me that if you're with a man, he should be on the outside. Because if a car jumps a curb, the car should take him out before it takes you out. Like, a man should always try to protect you. So you should be walking on the inside. He should be walking on the outside. Or just little things like when they open the door. It's like little things that you don't really think about until it's like almost like a flashback in time. Like, I remember my daddy telling me this.
And I will say this, going back to my dad, and I told you he wasn't the nurturing kind. We didn't have those kind of conversations about moving into relationships. So that's a good piece. So I'm out there ignorant. I don't even know. You know, all I know is, you know, a male gets to a certain age and has these strong feelings with no tangible, you know, guidance.
Because my dad made sure that I knew how to take care of myself if I had to. But he also made sure that I understood that when you meet a man, he should be able to do these things for you, so you don't have to do them yourself. But just in case, here, like a father should be able to equip his child with the skills to go out and be alone, or the skills to go out and be a partner.
Although the absence of fathers can sometimes lead to negative consequences, for others, their father's absence had the reverse effect, spurring them to become everything that their father was not. We also see examples of many loving, healthy families that don't include fathers at all. So, are fathers really necessary?
I think necessary would be a strong word, because I didn't for the totality of my childhood. I've seen others who've been successful and been solid contributors to our community and society without it. But it's highly preferable, highly preferred.
I think they're greatly needed. I think they're needed because they play a role in guiding and directing, you know, our children. They do.
I feel like, because the mom is somebody who's stern, but the father is somebody that nips it in the bud, so you never want to do anything like that again. And I feel like with that person around, you know, they're guiding you and they're making sure that you don't act up. And it almost like, it teaches your child a lesson when, you know, they mess up and the father comes around and nips it in the bud, you know. So without them in the community, it kind of, kids almost feel as if they don't have anything to look out for, anybody to watch out for.
I think fathers' roles are just as important as mothers' roles. Everybody has a place in the household in terms of what your role is to the child. It's a balance.
But then you got the family. You got a nice house. Both parents got a nice job. Kid in a nice school. That's how he learns. He see. It's visual. He lives it. That's how he want to live his life. Other than some who want to live it but can't, they don't know how to do it because you don't have one role player. You have that mom there.
Not only should they provide, but I think they're the cornerstone of the house. Like, I don't think the house can stand without them, but I don't think it should.
Well, my mom has played the mom and the dad, so no, not really.
Why not?
Because it's like my mom's played all the roles. Like, she's played my mom, my dad, and everything else. And it's like, well, she's already like a mom and a dad because she's a single parent and has to take care of her child by herself. So, I mean, it would be nice if my father lived with me, but he has like stuff going on. So.
If we brought your dad in right now, and you could basically say anything to him, what do you think it would be?
See, there's a lot of things going on in my head. Like, it could be, I could say thank you, thank you for leaving me with such a strong woman to be able to take care of me. I could say you weren't there, I couldn't rely on you, I couldn't trust in you, I couldn't talk to you, I could say that. But at this point, I mean, I'm grateful, I'm thankful for who I had to guide me.
I don't know what we'd even talk about, like, what there'd be to say. My little brother told him when I got into med school, and I was pissed. I was livid because I didn't feel that he'd been there for most of the struggle. Maybe he'd had his own simultaneous struggles that I wasn't aware of, but for me, getting into med school was big, and I'd worked hard to get to this point. So I didn't feel that was news that he was sort of entitled to, because he didn't help me get there.
I mean, I would probably thank him for not being it, because I learned a lot on my own, and I feel better that I learned it on my own versus somebody teaching me. So I mean, I would have, like, I had a lot of mixed feelings at first because I was younger and I really didn't see. And now that I'm older, I would probably thank him for not being it.
Now that we've explored the issue and seen some of the problems that can be caused by absent fatherhood, what exactly is it that these fatherless homes are missing? More specifically, what does good fatherhood look like?
How a man is supposed to treat a woman, how a man is supposed to, what things that men are supposed to look out for in society, what they have to beware of, how they need to present themselves, basic things like how to tie a tie, how to shave, what can I expect as my body changes and grows, and you have that kind of comfortable fathering / mentorship relationship that I think is very critical. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have someone who birthed you, who is your biological father or even a stepfather, but someone who is at least a father figure who is consistently around.
My father actually taught me to be proud. My father taught me to be the man that I am. He set such lofty goals that I'm trying to live up to them every day. And the reason being, he stabilized our household. He made us proud to be a Saintville. Like, when he said his name, he said Saintville like it was the strongest last name ever created. And I followed it. I carried it. And it made me feel good about it.
My dad he was always very responsible, reliable, because he was taking care of us. And he was a strong father figure. I mean, with good and bad. He wasn't perfect. Mm-hmm. You know, he didn't have, he had some shortcomings as well. But overall, he was really a good man and a good dad.
I did have a stepdad who really has shown me a lot in the future. In my latter years, since he's become a follower of Christ and really dedicated his life, he's shown me a lot really about marriage and servanthood.
Well, I mean, he did the basics, what you were supposed to do in a household. He was there, He wasn't the greatest, don't get me wrong, because it was certain things as I look back on it now, and I'm like, yeah, you could have done that better. But he was always there. He is always there.
Although not everyone grows up with a dad at home, many fatherless children are still able to reap the benefits of having positive male role models in their lives. These father figures prove to be invaluable sources of male influence for children who don't have men at home.
Well, he always looked out for me. If I would have got in trouble, he would talk to me, and it was like you really feel like a father person to me, because you're talking to me and you're seeing where I'm coming from and stuff like that.
I mean, I had a black principal in 8th grade when I graduated, and he came in with a positive outlook on how to make the school better, and he always, for some reason, looked out for me. He always wanted to make sure that I was behaving. He always wanted to make sure that my grades were up, I was handling the homework, so he would come in and check up on me every once in a while, have meetings with me and talk to me, make sure everything's okay. So if it would be anybody, it'd be him.
Growing up as a child was that I had a black doctor, a black male doctor. And I thought that was the coolest thing. When I first went to his office, I had transitioned. I was probably about 5. And my mother had transitioned me from a white male doctor to this black male doctor. And when I saw him, I was upset because I was like, doctors are supposed to be white. Why, how is he a doctor? He's black. That didn't come in my mind that a doctor could be black. But having him as a doctor allowed me to see, wow, there's other opportunities available for people like me.
So I definitely had mentors that stepped in. So I'm really big in the whole mentor, give back to young black men, because sometimes that's the gap you need. And I feel like I probably had a father. If you put all those mentors together, I did have a father, but not one I was related to.
For single mothers seeking male role models for their children, there are a number of mentoring programs that exist for that specific reason. National organizations such as Concerned Black Men and the National Cares Mentoring Movement have chapters in cities throughout the U.S. that offer mentoring opportunities specifically for boys and girls of color. Dr. Harlow noticed the need for youth mentoring, and it was a major motivation behind her founding Higher Learning.
I started off as a sociology professor, and I did that for 9 years. And in that time, what I came to realize is that the very students who needed the information that I was giving were those who didn't even have access to college. So issues about how inequality works, how you, the things that you have to know to even be prepared to enter college in a way where you can be successful, and not just in college, but in the world of work. If you want to go beyond kind of having a job and into a career, what are the kind of cultural things you need to know to interact with people, to present yourself in particular ways? What kind of access to knowledge beyond what you get in school do you have to have that people assume that you have?
With its focus and attention on the needs and experiences of students of color, Dr. Harlow noticed that a majority of the program's attendees were boys from single-parent homes.
So a lot of times programs like my extra academic programs tend to attract a lot of girls, but Higher Learning actually has a higher percentage of boys. And I think that that's because for some reason here, families are very worried about their boys and them going off the rails or getting off on the wrong track, getting in trouble and things like that, and they have a particular worry about their boys. Of those families, I would say maybe 3/4, maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of those families don't have fathers present.
Because of the high male student demographic, she saw a marked difference in the boys' attention when men were leading the program.
It's almost palpable that you can feel their desire to have some kind of male leadership, because whenever I have men who come in as guest lecturers, guest speakers, to do activities with them, it's like a magnet. They crowd around, especially black men, I should say. They crowd around them, they remember them, they hang on every word, they are some ways they turn into different kids. They're polite, they are attentive, they really thrive under just those couple of hours of attention.
A similar program that is steadfast in its commitment to mentor young black boys is 500 Men Making a Difference, which is based in Brooklyn, New York.
500 Men Making a Difference, we're a nonprofit organization, an official 501c3 nonprofit. And what 500 Men stands for is getting black brothers in the community out for volunteer projects to become mentors for the youth in the community, and also to just uplift the black brothers in the community.
And the more and more we did this, and the more we got men involved in the community and actually just doing something positive to benefit the community, the more we had fun with it. Because you can always do things to make money, you can always do things with your family, you can always do things with your friends, but to actually give back to the community without wanting anything back for self, it's a great way of giving.
For brothers, and with a lot, the main situation, a lot of fathers not being in brothers' lives, I think 500 Men and organizations that are similar to it kind of help just not even be that father figure, but just that guardian. Even if a brother doesn't have, a father, whether his father passed away, whether his father's just not there for him, whether his father's just not even sure how to be there for him. It's a great organization because it gives brothers a chance to really find themselves.
I believe it's much easier to raise a strong man than to fix an older broken man. So what we try and do is make sure that we have a proper influence on these young men and show them what it is to be a man.
One of their largest events is their annual Black Men's Brunch. With the help of Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, the brunch promotes networking amongst like-minded black men and provides black boys with the chance to benefit from newfound internship and job opportunities.
The Black Men's Brunch is probably one of the biggest ones because we try to bring in high school students and college students. So we bring them in and we have them amongst, these elected officials, brothers that have their own businesses, brothers that are excelling in their field, and we bring them around them and they get the opportunity to really just talk and hear about a brother that took a different route than most might have taken in their own community. That's definitely one event that we have that's very big for them. And then we also, out of today, we plan to get internships for these young brothers.
Higher Learning and 500 Men Making a Difference are great examples of the kinds of programs many single mothers lean on in an effort to provide their children with positive male influences. However, many of them believe that the onus should not fall solely on community-based organizations, but that the responsibility should be shared amongst all the members of the community.
When we were coming up, that saying, takes a village to raise a child, that was true to the saying. Nowadays, parents don't look at it that way. It's, don't you touch my child, don't you say nothing to my child. They're ready to fight you. If you even think to, correct a child. Whereas that when I was coming up, anybody corrected you and and it was okay.
I think it's going to have to be a lot more exposure. I think this has to be talked about a lot more in the community. I think it has to be some conversations on the community level about men in the community, men and families, men, being there for their children.
As iron sharpens iron, you would need men who are fathers, who are being fathers. And when I say being fathers, I don't mean just having children, but men that are there with their children to go out and encourage other men. Go out and say, this is what you can do, and support them, because it's not easy to transition. This is what I always believe. This is what I always seen in my life. This is what I've seen in my life. I don't know any other way. So you need men that kind of encourage, support, mentor, show them, develop them on how to be a father.
We always do a lot more, but one of the things that we have done is we have a youth program that involves adult male volunteers to help provide mentoring and a godly male example to some young lives. I think that's big.
Well, one, I believe they could find groups, initiatives, social organizations, programs that are already in existence that help to support the Black family and to contribute or be a part of these groups, to link themselves with these groups and support the groups. That's one way. A second way is just educating themselves about the family and about the Black family in particular. Some of the differences that we see in the Black family versus other families, some of the historic influences, effects that are taking place that we see even now that's impacting today, to educate themselves on those issues. What happened, what has happened, what are some things that continue to happen as a result. And I believe through educating themselves, they'll of course be more aware, but also they'll be able to become an advocate for strengthening families.
Regardless of the many outside influences that could potentially play a part in their child's upbringing, many single mothers struggle with the simple fact that they don't really know what they're doing when it comes to raising a child. So what advice could be offered to these women?
So for a single parent or for gay or lesbian households where they might not have a man around the house, to tap into those. I mean, like I said, there are mentoring programs and those are great, but I think even better than that are if you have close friends and family who you can constantly bring into your child's life, and you can also play that role for them.
I guess the best advice I can give is to surround yourself with people who will support you no matter what. You understand and you know that not everything will end up working out. Some people will come and some people will go, but you need to surround yourself with people who like will complement what you want your child to have and what your child should know to be successful.
Good things, sports, activities where mentoring programs, rites of passage programs, Boy Scouts, church, youth group, children's ministry. Keep them around and have controls over like what kind of things the kids get into, investigate it, you know, what kind of men are here.
There's sometimes when people break up, there's a lot of animosity between the couple. And sometimes mothers will keep their children away from the dad. And I think as long as the relationship is not detrimental to the child, and you can kind of work through it and communicate with the dad and where it's not negative towards the child, I think that they shouldn't be keeping the child away from their dad.
Keeping in mind all of the insurmountable evidence that proves the importance of fathers, many men approach this daunting task with an empty well of knowledge to draw from. Especially when considering that a number of black men did not grow up with their own fathers, it can be difficult to determine exactly what good fathering looks like. So, how might this advice differ for fathers?
From what I've learned, I would tell him to protect his family, provide for his children. I would tell him to keep his promises, be faithful to his wife, love his wife. I would tell him to talk about both sides of discipline. Don't just correct wrongdoing. Be a cheerleader for your kids too. Tell them to show affection for your kids every day. Teach them the language of love. Give them full expression of their emotions. Let them be safe, crying, emoting, and help them to understand that, you know, who they are.
Well, the role of the father should be as active and engaged as the role of the mother. And I think we do our kids a disservice and ourselves a disservice when we push fathers off to the side as being helpers or extras, or, you know, it always cracks me up when people, you know, when the fathers say, oh, I'm babysitting the kids today, or, you know, I'm watching the kids until so-and-so gets home. It's like, these are your kids. What do you mean babysit? Babysitting is what someone else does, not what fathers. If it's your father, it's your job to watch the kids, to take care of the kids.
I'm saying there's a balance. Men need to understand this part of training from, you know, boyhood on up. But it's like, you need to understand how to be that loving authority, that compassionate person in authority. Not a dictator and somebody that rules out of selfishness and that kind of thing. But your love, your compassion is why you protect.
Honestly, I think because men don't naturally have that maternal instinct like women do. You know, if you don't know, ask questions. If you know, if it's scary for us as women, we know it's scary for you. It's scary for the guys because they really don't know at that point. Like they don't, you know, it's a learning process for both people in going into parenting. Learning process. There is no right, there's no wrong. You know, there's somewhat common sense. You know the common sense things to do. But every day, there's a lesson learned in parenting. We learn something different every day.
What I view to be a father, you know, 23 years ago when I first became one, may be a little different now. I didn't see myself as an encourager, as a lover of my children. I saw myself as a provider, a protector, kind of man of the house, you know, disciplinarian, like, you know, keeping things straight, you know, gonna do what you're supposed to do. I didn't see myself, I think I see more of a gentler side of fatherhood now that I need to be as adept at doing.
A child will change your whole life because you got to do stuff a whole lot different. So my advice would just to be there, to just be that helping hand. Just be in the child's life, be in the woman's life, regardless of what y'all go through. Just be there.